So we've learned how to calculate mean, median, and mode by hand. Now we want to have Excel do those calculations for us. So we're going to try some examples. So for our first example, the information below gives the capacity in barrels per day in thousands for oil refining for companies with the largest oil refining capacity. We're going to calculate the mean and the median, and then we're going to identify which of those measures of location best describes the data and why. So we'll start with the mean. Now, if you don't remember what your function is, or you're not sure what its syntax is or how you're supposed to enter it, you can always, of course, go look for it in the formulas. So you just click on the formulas tab. We're going to insert a function. So the function we want is a statistical function. So if we go to the more functions list, that's where the statistical menu is, we want statistical. And in this list, big long list of statistical functions, in there is the function that's going to calculate the mean for us. So they're in alphabetical order. So if we go up to the M's, you'll notice that there is in fact no mean function. There's median, which we're going to need later, but there's no mean function. That's because Excel doesn't use mean for calculating the mean. They use average. Remember, that's what mean is. It's an average. So their mean function is actually average. And if you just hold your mouse over the function, it provides you with a little drop-down box that tells you what that function is going to calculate. So we're going to put in the average. So if you just click on that, it's going to insert average. Now we have to tell it where our data is. So in the function box, for the number 1 box, we're just going to highlight our cell range where our data is, and then we click OK. And there is our mean. So that's the mean of our list of data, 2425. Now remember, mean has the same units as the data. So the data is thousands of barrels per day. So we're just going to add in our units to go with our mean. And so there's our mean with its units. Now, of course, you can enter in the function directly rather than looking it up on the insert function menu. And certainly mean is probably one of those ones that you're going to be using quite a lot. So you'll probably just end up memorizing what the formula is. So you could just put it in directly. So to do that, we would just go equals, average, an open bracket, highlight your cell range, close bracket, enter. 2425. So either way is going to get you there to the mean. Now let's do the median. So again, we'll look it up on the insert function menu, back to statistical, and back down to the M's where the median was. So there's median, which we saw before when we were looking for the mean. Just going to click on median. Again, function box is going to open up. We're going to put our cell range in, and then we click OK. And that gives us our median of 1965, which has the same units as the mean, and the data for that matter, thousands of barrels per day. Of course, with the median, you can also, of course, enter it directly rather than using the insert functions on Excel. So just equals, median, open bracket, highlight your cell range, and there's our median. Now they've also asked us which measure of location best describes the data and why. So if we look at our data, which is in column A, it's arranged in descending order. We can see that the first number, 6,300, and then there's quite a big gap to the next number, which is 3,791. That tells us 6,300 is an outlier. And one of the things that we discussed when we were talking about mean was the fact that mean is highly susceptible to outliers, and that outliers tend to pull the mean away from where the majority of the data is. And that's what's happening here. So because of the outlier, the mean is not the best measure of location. Instead, we would use the median, because median is not affected by outliers. So the median is the best measure of location because the mean is pulled away from the majority of the data by the outlier 6,300. So let's move on to example 2, where we want to calculate out some modes. So the latest Canadian census asks every household to report information on each person living there. Suppose we have a sample of 40 households and the number of people living there was reported. We want to calculate the mode for this data. Now, when we were talking about modes, we saw that a set of data could have no modes, it could have exactly one mode, or it could have multiple modes. Now, we have to figure out in our data which one of those situations we have, because if we have more than one mode, we have to use a different function in Excel. Excel won't automatically go searching for multiple modes unless it knows it's supposed to be looking for multiple modes. So the first thing we have to do is we have to count how many modes we have. So to do that, we're going to use a count function. So just going back to our list of functions, okay, we want to do a count. So there's count. So we're going to count how many modes we have. So if we click on count, and in the count box, we're going to count how many modes there are. So in the first box, we're going to put in mode.mult, and then we're going to highlight our data range. And then we're going to click OK. So you can see up here in the function box, what I have for my function is count, mode.mult, and then my cell range. So mode.mult is the multiple mode function. So if you have multiple modes, that's the function that we would use to find them. So we're telling Excel, count how many modes there are in this data. So you could put this function in directly. It's probably easier to do it that way. So equals count, open bracket, mode.mult, open bracket, highlight your cell range, a couple of closed brackets, and hit enter. And it tells us that there's one mode. So in this data, there's only one mode. So now we're going to find out what that mode is. So this is a set of data that has exactly one mode. So when we find the mode, because we know that there's only one, so going back to our list of statistical functions, down here you'll see there's mode.mult. So that's the one that we used when we were doing the count. And then mode.sngl, which is mode.single. So if you have multiple modes, we would use mode.mult to find them. For mode.single, that's going to calculate one mode. Now, if you have multiple modes and you use mode.single, it's only going to find one of them. Whichever one it comes across first, that's the one that it'll give back to you. So it won't give you multiple modes if you have it. So that's why we have to do the count to start with. So there's only one mode here. So we are going to use mode.single. So it's just like the other measures of location functions we've seen. In your box, in your function box, you just highlight your cell range and then click OK. And the mode is 3. So you can, of course, enter that in directly as well. So you just go equals mode.sngl, open bracket, highlight your cell range, and then there's your mode 3. So let's try one more example doing all of the measures of location, and in this case, hopefully there's more than one mode in this data. So a quality assurance check at a Coca-Cola bottling plant checked the fill level on a number of 591 milliliter bottles. The sample information is given below. We want to find the mean, the median, and the mode. So since we already know what the functions are for the mean and the median and the mode, I'm just going to enter them directly rather than look them up on the insert function list. So my mean is, I got to put in my equal sign, average, open bracket, highlight your cell range, close bracket, hit enter. 591.06 is the mean. Now this data is measured in milliliters, so that would be our units for our mean. For our median, equals median, open bracket, highlight the data, and we get a median of 591.10. And again, that has the same units as the mean, which is measured in milliliters. So now for the modes. Again, we need to count how many modes there are, because that's going to tell us which of the two mode functions we're going to use. So equals count, open bracket, mode.mults, open bracket, highlight our cell range, couple of close brackets, and we get the number of modes is 2. So there's 2 modes in this data. So that means when we calculate out the mode, we're going to be doing mode.mult. Now for the multiple mode function, its output is actually a vertical array. So we have to tell Excel that its output is going to be a vertical array. So what we're going to do is we're going to just highlight 2 vertical cells. So just put your mouse over one, hold the left button down, and drag to the second box. If you had 3 modes, you'd highlight 3 boxes, 4 modes, you'd highlight 4 boxes, and so on. Okay. Now we're going to put in our mode.mult function. So I'm just going to put it in directly, but you can look it up on the insert functions if you want. So it's equals mode.mult, open bracket, highlight your cell range, and then a close bracket. Now don't hit enter. If you hit enter, you're going to have a problem. Because the output is a vertical array, we need to tell Excel that when we hit enter. So we have to hit Control Shift Enter, and that will display our vertical array of modes, which are also measured in milliliters. So we get 2 modes, 591.33 and 591.04.